Welcome to another episode of Unapologetically Strong on WOVU 95.9 FM. It is the fourth Wednesday of the month. That means we got 5 of these and y'all give me one more week. But this week we got a very special guest. As I said, this whole month has been dedicated to family. And so each week that you spend with me, we have been talking primarily about family and what family can and cannot do for us. And today we have a very special guest who is my family member, but he's a brother from another mother. We have brother Samuel Wright III. What's going on, Sam? How you feel, man?
Everything's good. Good to be reconnected with a longtime friend and somebody I consider my brother.
All right, man. So we gonna get your levels up, because right now you whispering, but we gonna get your levels up. But what I like to know and what I like to hear is, I got you. Go ahead and sit back, bro. This is technical difficulties, brother, man. So I got you piped up now. So we good. So today, like I said, we've been talking about family all this month. And so today we're going to add on to our family conversation. And in adding on to our family conversation, we're going to talk about that mean green, that money. I wish I had like a little drop. You know, that little money.
Money. The class, not the OJs. It's the OJs.
Yeah, I think it's the OJs. I think it's the OJs.
Yeah.
But I would
all-time heroes.
Yeah. So what I want is we're going to bring in this money conversation, and in bringing in this money conversation, we're going to just boil down to everything that's going on as it relates to family. So we're going to talk about how to raise our kids right with money. We're going to talk about how to flower our marriage right with money. And then we're going to talk about how to build our communities right with money. All right. You good? You got all that?
I'm a money man. You taking the thoughts right out of my head when you told me the topic.
Right.
But 3 absolutes I had in mind.
But before we jump on that, what I do want to do is just go backwards. So anytime that I have a guest on, I have been blessed to have some amazing friends. I've been blessed to have some amazing individuals that have come through my circle. So I always like to talk about how I got connected to the people that are connected to me. So first of all, Brother Sam, you and I have been together since our days at the Cleveland State University. And, you know, both of us had a similar mission, right? So you had a child at the time, I had a child at the time. And so we were trying to, move forward based off of what you remember about where you were when we first met. So let me just go back. So right now you're the vice president, program manager of SBA or Small Business Lending Program at Huntington Bank. And so to go from an individual who, we marched on Washington, right? Remember we took, back in our Black Student Union days, we took, the van or the
down there.
Right. We took the bus down there and, we marched on Washington. So you and I have done a lot of stuff. But before we jump into that, I do want to thank you, for being a part of this conversation and offering, everything that you have to offer. So when we talk about money and we talk about Sam Wright, how did you come to the point of understanding the power in money?
Man, wow, that's a loaded question, but I'm happy to talk about it because I think it haunts a lot of us. And so, first off, it was amazing times at the Cleveland State University. I like how you put that. And growing and maturing and developing alongside a good brother like yourself and many others that I encountered during my experience there. And secondly, we made memories I'll never forget. So it not only was it a wonderful time, but we created memories that are tattooed in my mind forever that believe it or not, have influenced who I am now in the track I took career-wise. So let's talk about how I got into money. And so I had a lot of money trauma, just in the spirit of vulnerability.
Yep.
When I was younger, I grew up in I hate to say, an inner city typical situation, single mom, 3 kids, limited resources. And so absent fathers. So me and my brothers all got different fathers. And so it was a whole lot of scarcity, is what I
Mm-hmm.
call it,
Yeah.
tends to permeate into people's lives when they do start getting money. They kind of keep that scarcity mentality just based on some of their life experiences with money. So I had money trauma.
Yeah.
And so that trauma really led me to be curious about ways I could better position myself. And at the time, this is when I was much younger that I was having these thoughts. So I didn't have a family yet. And things that I needed to proactively do to position myself to be a better financial provider for my family and to get out of this scarcity cycle.
Yeah.
At the time, I didn't know what was meant by scarcity. I hadn't like really got familiarized myself with that type of trauma, and I'm sure being in the mental health space, you can relate to that because I'm sure you probably encounter people who have
Right.
trauma due to scarcity. And so that led me to pursue a degree initially in accounting. I thought I wanted to be an accountant because I thought that they dealt with money because I know they did the bookkeeping.
Right.
And I took a couple and realized they didn't work very close alongside of people. And so I was like, I'm a people person for sure. I can't be nowhere tucked in no back room, just on a computer crunching numbers. I need to figure out what I can do to get in and, in front of some people with finance. And so then I was shifting my head. I was part of a great program, by the way, before I came to Cleveland State. I was a part of a great program called the TRIO program at Tri-C.
Yep.
So the TRIO program, I had a fantastic woman that I had encountered that God put in my life by the name of Jane, who was my counselor. Woman, not in an intimate sense, but woman in the sense that helped give me light and direction during that season of my life. And Jane was really instrumental with encouraging me to keep going to school, keep taking classes. So I graduated from Tri-C, went to Cleveland State, then met, more great people at Cleveland State in like counseling departments and being a part of the Black Student Union, as you mentioned. And then I finally figured it out. I said, well, I took a real estate class and an investment class, and I really liked those topics.
Yep.
I said, I want to do something in the world of finance with like investing or real estate.
Mm-hmm.
And so I fast forwarding, I ended up getting my degree in finance instead of accounting. So I got my business degree in finance with a concentration in finance. When I finished off at school, I got into the financial services business, which we may talk a little bit more about. But that was the genesis of this whole idea of getting into finance and my life experience that lent itself to want me to pursue a career in finance.
Yeah.
Because of my trauma as a youth and my scarcity environment that I was so scarred by that I absolutely didn't want that forever.
Yeah.
And so I knew I needed something, and I did not always the right thing when I was being in the environment I was in. That's a topic for another conversation, but I definitely was always productive, hustling, trying to find a way to be enterprising and get more resources so I can help my mom and my brothers were 10 years younger than me. My brothers were 10 years younger than me. And so it was like being a man of the house. So money was a topic that was top of mind. I know that's a long explanation, but hopefully that answers the question.
No, what you was actually explaining, fits 100%. It's that idea of economic trauma. So a lot of times economic trauma is that fuel that leads us, to a lot of things that we deal with. And just like you, I went to Tri-C. You and I have a very similar background prior to meeting and then after meeting, right? So this idea of economic trauma and what you're actually explaining is something that I hear, frequently, which also brings that fear of money. So we have this, when you have that scarcity mentality and you have that fear of money, what do you actually do when working with individuals? We're going to get in a little bit more into that. But when you look at how you looked at money in relation to your peer group at the time, did you find that there was a level of fear of money, not only the fear of not having money?
That's a good question. I think from my experience being in finance, so for me personally, it wasn't a fear, it was a desire to get more. So I was never like afraid of money per se, but it was an unhealthy desire to get more, meaning by whatever means necessary.
Right.
And then the neighborhood I grew up in, you could probably draw some conclusions to ways to get money in that environment in inner city Cleveland back in the 90s and the late 80s.
Right.
And so but usually I meet people that are that have had money trauma. I'll just generalize this
Yeah, I
from
got
my experience in
you.
finance. So either they're unhealthily, I don't want to say addicted to money, but pursuing the accumulation of money
Yeah.
with no purpose, just because they got either good work ethic, they got like, personality, whatever, or skill, and they go pursue it. And those people tend to be like money hoarders.
Hmm.
Then I meet other people who have money trauma who like don't want too much money because they're afraid of how it might affect their family. And so, like, meaning they make a negative association with more money because they think that more money wields more power for the person to accumulate money, which in a lot of cases, traditionally have been men in the house,
Right.
right? And how men could wield that over the family or the woman or the kids as a control mechanism. And so that makes them more like, I don't want to say anti-money, but they're kind of like, I don't want a lot of money because my experience with money has been about control.
Mm.
I don't want to feel control.
Right.
And so for me, though, personally, to your question, I didn't have a fear of it. I had an unhealthy desire to accumulate it with no purpose at the time. When I was younger, I just wanted it because I know that it would lend itself to allow me to have experiences and or buy things that I wanted or needed. And so that was my experience. But I think that, people, and I heard in the scarcity thing, I heard at so I've heard it in a number of environments to date, but the one that stood out to me was when I was and this is deviating a little bit, but still on topic, when I was taking my daughter to college visits and we were at a orientation at Spelman University in Atlanta, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
It was just the parents. And then it was like two students from the school. Like one was a graduate, one was a current student. And a young lady that graduated said something that always stuck with me and really led to my decision to allow my daughter to go to Spelman was at Spelman, and this is in a different context, but it's the same thing. It's the same thing as it could be with money. But her statement was, at Spelman, we teach our sisters an abundance mentality, meaning there's plenty for everybody and not a scarcity mentality. And the point she was making was in most communities of women, in particular minority women who have been oppressed and lack resources, there is this idea of scarcity or there's not enough.
Yeah.
And so everybody's competing for limited resources, which breeds bad relationships, which as a counselor, I'm sure you understand that, right? And so her point was, hey, they're instilling in us at Spelman, the teachers, the leaders, the educators, the staff, is, hey, it's plenty for everybody. You all are sisters. You all go out and get it together. You don't have to step on Eric to get to your next position. You could bring Eric with you because you all both are very intelligent, strong Black women in this context,
right,
that she was sharing. And so she was like, when she got to Spelman, she had a scarcity mentality because of the neighborhood she grew in.
Mm-hmm.
And as her experience grew at Spelman, she adopted an abundance mentality, which in the United States, you and I know there's plenty of everything for everybody. It's just about positioning yourself to get it.
Exactly.
So the scarcity so anyway, I deviated, but I wanted to make that connection because that's the context I heard scarcity versus abundance. It resonated personally with me a lot because it was in relation to my oldest daughter who went to Spelman. And I'm proud to say she graduated in 2019 from Spelman University. So she's officially a Spelman sister. And and that just really resonated with me because I grew up in a scarcity environment, younger, in terms of resources, jobs, what the community had. And to hear that coming from a young African-American woman was really powerful and inspiring and just made my heart smile. I knew that would be a good place for my daughter to experience education if they were teaching that model to young Black women. Because it's all, for those who aren't familiar with Spelman, it's an all girls school, private in Atlanta, Georgia, and it's a HBCU.
That's right. Historically Black college and university. So shout out to my HBCU graduate wife, Joy King, and then shout out to my daughter, Caitlin King, who's on her way, definitely went to a HBCU, maybe even Spelman. What's interesting about that transition, when you look at it from abundance, you're looking at it from using money as a tool. in your day-to-day life, right? So before we take a break, and we're going to talk about a little bit more about this on the other side. In your day-to-day life, you're teaching people how to use money as a tool. And that in order for you to use money as a tool, you have to conquer the fear or the scarcity or any other emotional connection you got to that tool. When you're working with people, like seriously, in all honesty, because although I'm a licensed counselor, you are a counselor of money as well. When you're working with people with a scarcity mentality or that struggle with money, right? How do you get them to transition from a fear-based model of money to a tool-based model of money?
That is a very good question. And I don't know, we want to go to break and I come back and unpack that. You want me to
you want me to give you some time? I'll give you some time.
I got a lot of thoughts on it though. I could shoot, but I might eat our break up. So I don't know however you want me to do it. If we could push the break out, go ahead and talk for 3 to 4 minutes on that. If you need the break out, I'll come back to it.
We're gonna take the break. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this break, and we're going to head over after this. Yeah, we're going after this. I need for you to remember the question. You think you can do that?
I got it.
All right,
I got it. Yeah.
All right. So
attachment versus tool attachment is how I interpreted that.
Yes. So we're going to take a quick break. This is Unapologetically Strong on WOVU 95.9 FM. Welcome back. Big shout out to Burden Bell Carr for providing those funds to those 11 organizations that was just mentioned during that promo. So as the promo said, we are talking. Well, the promo wasn't for today's show, but it just so happened to fit. I didn't even know that was the one I was going to play. But you know how God works. God do the thing. So we speaking with the vice president of, program management, SBA business lending program at Huntington National Bank, brother Sam Wright III. After that, I'm not going to call you Sam Wright III. I'm just going to call you Sam like I call you any other time. But on the other side of the commercial, I asked you a question that has to do with transition, right? We go from individuals, which are mostly people of color, mostly people that grow up in underserved areas, have this, that scarcity or that struggle mentality as it relates to money that is generally, emotionally based. If you are an individual that choose to live within in this world of America, you have to go from that, whether you have your own business or not, you have to go from that emotional state of money to that tool base of money. So I'm going to throw it back over to Sam. Go ahead, Sam. You got the floor.
Yeah, sure. So I think that one, having conversations like this and helping people realize and understand that their relationship with money is dysfunctional is likely the root cause of that is typically how they're raised about money. So whether it's, your parents not talking to you about it, you're not having enough of it. And it could work both ways. It could work. You could be in dysfunction if you grew up with a whole lot of money or you grew up with no money, right? So that's the emotional attachment in my mind, though, is the way people associate money is typically based on either their parents or whoever they were raised with, how money is handled or managed and or if it's talked about at all, right? And so I think the first step in overcoming the emotional attachment to money, because that's what I think about when you talk about fear or you talk about scarcity or you talk about, obviously scarcity is more than, just an emotion. That's actually the lack of having, right? But there's some emotional implications for that. And so I think the starting point is acknowledging that, or realizing, I want to say acknowledging, realizing that money is simply a tool or a means to a way, right? And so money is only as good as you do with it. So I was talking to some young people at a presentation I was doing back in about 3 weeks ago with a young entrepreneur training school. Shout out to Tori Coates, who's organizing that. And so we were talking, I was talking to a young man in the room and he said, I just want a whole bunch of money. And then I started asking him some probing questions. I'm like, well, if you had a whole bunch of money but no friends and you couldn't leave the house, how much would it mean to you? And he said, I would have $1 million bed, I said, if you had $1 million bed with nobody to get in it with you, and it was just you, back to you being in the house with $10 million, with the example I gave, how much would it mean to you? And he started to think, you kind of get where I'm going. The point is, the money is only as good as what you want to do with it.
Right.
So it's not about getting more money. It's about, why do you want more money? And when you get the money, what is it going to allow you to do? Because money, to your point, is a tool, right? So if it's just a tool, I think the place to start to disassociate the emotion is to say, okay, set goals financially for yourself attached to something. So whether it's a family trip, it's an item that you want, it's a house that you want, it's going out to dinner, twice a month with your spouse or significant other, making that connection to the money and the end result is where it becomes a tool versus an emotional attachment, right? Now, there's some emotion and things that you want. So you want a nice house, but why do you want a nice house?
Right.
You want to go out to eat, well, why do you want to go out to eat? Probably because you're going with somebody, like somebody you care about, right? So you got to start making a connection with money and the things that it allows you to do. And I really think, my opinion, and from what I've learned in my young life, I still got a lot of living to do, right? Is that when you have a purpose, so when you define your purpose in life, so like your purpose is to help people with mental health. My purpose is to help people with financial literacy and overcoming money trauma, let's say. When you begin to define your purpose, then you can easily start connecting the money to the things you want to do.
Exactly.
Right? And I always tell my son this often. I have a son who's 24, and because he's, a young African-American man in America, and we're influenced heavily by media and TV, he wants a lot of money because that's what he sees on TV. That's what's influencing his thinking, like most of us, right? And so I always tell him, I say, if you focus on creating something or getting into a field that will significantly impact a lot of people, if you focus on just mastering a craft that does that, the money will come.
Yeah.
You won't even have to worry about the money. And I give them examples. I said, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos solved huge problems for millions of people. And the byproduct of solving those problems, so Mark Zuckerberg helping people connect, they got family out of town through pictures and communication, i.e. Facebook. Bill Gates helping people use computers like we're using now. And the goal for Microsoft back in the 80s, late 70s was to put a personal PC on everybody's desk in the world. She's pretty close to that now, right? Now we've got our hand with a cell phone. Jeff Bezos getting people products and services they want to their house. And Jeff Bezos, Amazon started as a book delivery service.
Yep.
So he's evolved into what he is now. But those are just some very extreme examples of people in the United States who have solved a major problem that help a lot of people. And their money at this time is unlimited now, right? So I always tell people, define your purpose first. Once you define your purpose, begin to attach the money that you're going to make from living in that purpose to things that you want to do, whether it's a house, travel, going out to eat with your wife or your kids or your husband, taking your family on trips annually, whatever that goal is, then you begin to disassociate the emotion from just having money.
Okay.
Because I think most people just want to have money because that's what's inundated in the media or movies. That is a good thing to have, because money does allow you the opportunity to experience and do things that most people want to, or the individuals want to do. I won't say most people, but what individuals want to do. And so I think the genesis of shifting from the emotional connection to money as a tool is, one, defining your purpose. So what do you want to do in life? What kind of impact do you want to have? And then two, as you do that, what are some things that you personally want to do for yourself or your family or your friends or whoever that you can associate or tie to the money in that goal?
Okay. So when you're working with a family, or you're working with in marriage, so we see that the divorce rate is pretty high. And some of the reasons, and definitely some of the things that I'm seeing now, is related to how a family organizes money. When you're working with families and you're working with a family that wants to go and start a business, what are some things as a couple, right? We're not talking about individual. And then we'll also talk about kids later on. But as a couple, what should a couple do, right? If they have an idea, they see a need, they have a purpose, and they want to work together to build, not, I know the buzzword is generational wealth, but build something out of nothing for the possibilities of generational wealth. What are some of the things that you tell couples that come to you that want to build something together, but has, some barriers?
For sure. I think that that is a great question, and there's a couple different answers. So the first thing I would say, as it relates to couples, is the first thing you have to do is have a money. I don't want to call it a protocol because that sounds so formal. My wife be like, "You are so formal." So I'm kind of more relaxed word than protocol. You want to have money rules, if you would.
Yeah, discipline.
But I think that would establish those before you get to those injection points where you're trying to make a decision, right?
Right.
So I think that you got to create the rules first. And the way that you create the rules is through communicating and having, I don't want to say formal, because again, my wife says I'm always, but having, having some meeting, some intentional, I should say, so not formal, let's say intentional meetings scheduled around a conversation about money. And it should happen before you need to make a decision. And so, and in most cases, that looks like creating philosophies or values around how you all utilize the tool of money for yourself and your family, right?
Right.
If you're not married yet, I got this sage advice years ago. Is talk about money before you get married.
Man.
So when you're going through marriage counseling and you're building up to that, this is the person you want to be with. Have very frank and candid conversations about each person's view on money.
Okay.
So like, how do you think it should be spent? What's your credit score? We're getting serious about this thing. What's your credit score? Because that's a gauge of money, and how people manage money is the credit score. It's not always the obvious. It's not the only consideration, right? Because things happen, et cetera. But that's a good gauge. Like if you're talking and you're getting serious with somebody, you at least want to know. Even if it's not a great, if it's great credit or not great credit, you at least want to know where they are so you can make an informed decision of what you're getting into.
Exactly.
Talk about debt, talk about what's currently on the menu in terms of obligations. And so the first step is like really creating this foundation of how we're going to deal with money, our beliefs and our values with our money, and are they aligned?
Okay.
And oftentimes you're because everybody grows up in a different house.
Right.
They're typically not aligned.
Nope.
And so they might not be far off, because we usually gravitate to people that are similar to us. But they say opposite. Paul Abdul said years ago, opposites attract. So that could be true. Anyway, I think having a conversation, being candid, and having a conversation in a loving, respectable way, not a judgmental way.
Yeah.
So meaning that I have to feel safe. That I can tell you that my credit is a 600, and I don't feel you're going to judge me, but you're going to embrace me and encourage me and help me get to an 800 if that's where I'm trying to go, right?
Right.
And so I think that's where it starts. And then once you create your money philosophy or your money values, it makes it much easier to engage conversations about, should we start this business? Because now, if we say we should start the business, that's fine. But what do we need to do to position ourselves to start it? We can't just wake up and start it, because being an entrepreneur, you could, but that's not the best route to go, because entrepreneurship takes a lot of thought, consideration, and effort and energy. Because it's not only the money, it's the time that it takes to be an entrepreneur, right? You know that firsthand.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's going to be days where you can't make it to your kids' games if you're an entrepreneur, because you got an obligation to get the business going. And for most entrepreneurs, to the business question, for the first probably 10 years, it's a very hectic schedule.
Yeah.
And if they do it well and they build good foundations and good systems, after 10 years, they have usually, if they're really successful, they have a whole lot of flexibility in their schedule, meaning they can go to a game, they can take the family trip, but they got to build the foundation for the business and the infrastructure and the systems, and find the people that they want to operate in those systems for them to be effective. So back to your question, I was going to your So how do they do that? How do they have that conversation? So one, we're assuming that we've already established the values around money in terms of how we're going to spend it, how we're going to decision on it. So meaning that if we have a major expense, how we're going to approach that major expense. And then two, the other thing so going into the conversation about entrepreneurship in particular, when you got a couple, is really being the entrepreneur, being really transparent about their vision with the partner, and the partner not being judgmental again, but being more compassionate about the entrepreneur side of the couple's vision, so that they can feel like that it's an encouraging conversation, even if it's not the decision we're making today that's favorable from a financial standpoint, but we're at least encouraging each other both ways. So meaning that the entrepreneurs get encouragement, and the person on the other side of the equation, who maybe not the entrepreneur of the family, is getting transparency around the vision. I think transparency solves a lot in a lot of these money cases. So transparency and not hiding stuff, and just being frank and upfront, whether you think you're going to get a good response or not, I think really solves a lot. So I feel like that's a long answer, but that's what I would say. So build the values around money before you get to a conversation or an injection point, like I want to launch a business, or I want to buy a new car, or those sort of things. Have a value system in place, how you evaluate those decisions. I was reading an article recently that said, if you're making a purchase that's more than 1% of your annual income, sleep on it. And I thought that was sage advice. So if you made $100,000, for example, and you were purchasing something that was more than $100,000, more than $1,000, excuse me, then the article was basically saying that don't buy that today. Sleep on it. Take all of those steps I just mentioned. Talk to your spouse, talk to your partner, see if it's the best decision, even if you got the money in the bank, in a savings account, see if it's the best decision at the moment and how you want to use that resource, and then come back to that transaction.
So what's interesting is that concept of patience, that concept of transitional patience, to where delayed gratification. There are times when you're working or you have a family. So as a counselor, and I look at the family system, I always ask about money. And when I ask about money, I hear certain buzzwords: what I deserve, I work hard. We hear these buzzwords with individuals because they feel emotionally vindicated in how they spend their money and how they manage their money. And when you attempt to communicate with them about how that is becoming damaging, it becomes as a really emotional debate. When you're working with a family, because you've been a banker as well, when you're working with a complete family.
20 years.
20 years.
Can you believe it? We went from tutoring high school students to you in mental health, and I'm in finance. Kind of cool transition.
But it was all math. But when you are counseling, and you've been a family banker, and you're hearing these buzzwords, you're hearing these things. Is your first thought that this, whatever y'all going through, is not going to work? Like, what's your first thought when you hear these buzzwords of deserve and I'm entitled to and I work hard? Like, what goes through your head?
Yeah, no, for sure. So I immediately go to empathy, and I think trauma. So this person has obviously had an experience with money that makes them feel this way. So it's not like, because again, back to the money is just a tool. It's literally a piece of paper that's a medium of exchange to go get things that you want to get, or things you think you deserve in that case. So I immediately, I'm always the type of personality when I'm talking to people is I don't rush to judgment based on the initial interaction, because I know I don't know the whole story yet. Right. So if I'm just meeting this person as a banker, I'm processing this and I'm making a mental note like, oh, maybe this person had, maybe their parents had a lot of money and were controlling with the money and wielded that over them. And so now they feel like they got their own, or maybe they got a spouse that's that way, or maybe, they've been bullied or something in some way along the way. And so those are the things I started thinking. Obviously, I don't say that to the customer.
Right.
I just ask more questions. So my response is to asking more questions. And usually I always think of getting to the root cause, which is through the 5 whys. So we learned that in B school. You probably remember that. So asking why 5 times, because usually the first answer isn't the The first answer is the surface level answer. The second answer, you get a little deeper. By the time you get to the fifth why, you usually get to the root of why they really feel that way.
Yeah.
And exactly. So this is the approach I use. The other thing I would say is that back to the building a framework around money as a tool, I didn't throw this in there, but I think this is important for the audience to understand, is when you're having those conversations with, whether it's a business partner, a relationship partner, like in like a marriage or a partnership, like through a relationship outside of business, then it's very important for you all to document what you want to do through a budget. So it's important to have a budget at the foundation of that conversation. And it's important to do that before you get to a crossroad where you need to make a decision. It's important to just start outlining some of that stuff. I would recommend doing it over dinner, like in a real relaxed environment where it doesn't feel like a work meeting, where it feels more like, hey, we're just bonding relationally. We're getting our house in order, so to speak, as it relates to dollars and cents. And this is one of the tools we're going to use. So have a budget, make out the budget, see kind of where you are, and that kind of can guide the conversation. But back to the thought of, if somebody's using words like I'm entitled, this is my money, they're really emotionally attached to it. I use the technique of the 5 whys to really understand why they feel that way. Then I give them advice based on my professional experience. So if it's an investment recommendation, I kind of give them some insight and try to tie that back to whatever their goal is with their dollars or their money. Because a lot of people, and you got to think about, there's a range of people with money trauma.
Right.
Think about people who through the Great Depression, right? So that was a very traumatic time financially. Americans that are in the older generation, much older than us, obviously. But in banking, you meet people. I meet people a range of ages. I meet people in the 90s.
Right.
I meet people in the 20s or their late teens even. So I'm just really kind of having that perspective on kind of what's the root? Why do they feel this way? Why is this their goal? And really understanding that so that I can give good advice and guidance.
Okay. So what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna take our break a little early because I want to bring in the kids. And so I don't want to bring in the kids now, but I do want to bring in the kids in the way that fits into the family piece that you were just talking about.
Got little ones, man.
Because like you said, you and I started after graduating from CSU, we went and worked in a education enrichment program where we taught math. And a lot of times we needed to equate math to money. And I know for a fact that I learned a lot about certain people, certain kids based off of that money. So we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come on the other side. We're going to bring the kids into it. So this is Unapologetically Strong on WOVU 95.9 FM. Welcome back. Shout out to DJ Lily Gade. And we going to bring in this idea of the kids, of the babies. All right. So you and I, after graduating, right, we worked for an organization. Shout out to our brother Ray Spotsville. We worked for an organization, and that organization's mission was to increase, if I remember, the mathematical literacy of those that we served. And mostly those that we served were black boys and girls. So this idea of money, it used to come up all the time because in order for me to connect to the kids when we worked in this program, we had to talk about money. And I learned so much about how these kids that we worked with viewed money. When you're working with families and you're trying to educate these families on working with money with their child, what are some of the things that stand out for you in ensuring that these people are not handing down their economic trauma or their struggle mentality or their scarcity mentality to their kids while trying to, incorporate, whole family growth in the financial industry?
I think that is so important, Eric. I think that when you think about legacy, I think you mentioned that word earlier, passing on the legacy of a business. there's a lot of stuff that us as parents pass down through legacy, meaning that there's things that we pass to our kids intentionally and unintentionally, right? And so I think that money conversation, just to make it simple, I don't want to say make it simple, but to make it frank, I think the first place to start is having those conversations around the dinner table.
Mm-hmm.
And so talking about the importance of, and I tell my kid, you can call any of my kids now. I say, how much of your money should you be saving? You get $10, you get $100,000, you get $1 million. How much should you be saving? And their gut response is going to be 30%. So I've been preaching that to them all their life. I said, if you get $10, save $3. You got 7 to spend, save 3. That way, if you want to do something in the future, you kind of let that build. You have some dollars for yourself. So I think the first thing is just having conversations, practical conversations about money around the dinner table, being intentional. Back to that intentionality, not formal, because my wife hates when I'm too formal. I can get that way just by personality. And so being intentional about having those conversations with the kids and being transparent about the mistakes you made with money.
Yeah.
I think that so often as parents, now I've learned this just through therapy and getting older, is we try to be this facade for our kids that we want them to think we're perfect parents, that our life has been perfect, that we haven't had any bad experiences, most of us at least. And so getting past that and saying, hey, being vulnerable and say, hey, I didn't make the best decision with this money. Or, when I was younger, I made bad decisions on how I got money. You don't want to go that route. This is why. And just really having those frank conversations with our kids about money. And then, so that's the first thing. So having just frank conversations, being intentional about having conversations in those moments where it's not intense. So like you're just eating dinner, which I'm a big fan of bringing back the family dinners.
Yeah,
and I think there so much with this social media and these iPads and the kids being in their rooms on games that I'm in my house, we all getting together and sitting down and doing dinner. And that's where we having family conversations at. Unless daddy's traveling or mommy's traveling, if I'm home and we're all home, which I try to be more often than not, we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about your day. We're going to eat. We're going to put the electronics are going to stay wherever they at. And so I think that's uber important to kind of get into that mental real estate with your kids and kind of program them in those areas that you want to program them in. So the first thing is having a conversation. The second thing is actually giving them, when they get old enough, an experience to associate with the value of money. So, for example, I have a 4-year-old. And so with my 4-year-old, I begin to give her an allowance. And when we go to the store and she wants to buy something, I say, hey, you got your money. Remember, we're going to say, and for her, I'm telling her to save 50% of it. Because I think 30% is conservative or not enough when you're little, because you don't got no bills. We paying all the bills. So you need to save 50% of it. And so having that conversation and then making it tangible. So like giving her physical dollars and going to the store so she could feel the exchange. Like this, you don't just walk out the store with an item, we got to pay for it.
Right.
And then we go to the register, we're going to pay the cashier or pay the machine for that. Or you give me your money, I'm going to put my card in usually. And now these dollars you don't have. And so just giving them those real experiences. And then the other thing from an entrepreneur standpoint, because I don't think that our young people get enough exposure to the idea of entrepreneurship, is I'm going to do the old school lemonade stand with my daughter. So I just moved, as you know.
Yeah.
And so I was telling my daughter before we moved, she was watching something on YouTube and they had like a lemonade stand.
Yeah. I
said, baby, we could do that. Let's do a lemonade stand. But I'm going to do it from the beginning. I'm going to take her to the store. We're going to buy the stuff. I'm going to show her how much it costs to buy the stuff. We're going to come back. We're going to go through the homeowners association to see how we set it up. So I'm going to talk her through that. So I'm going to talk her through the whole experience. So she's just not going to show up and there's lemonade and chairs out there. She thinks that the lemonade might have been there. We didn't have to buy it. It was free. We're gonna go through the process of buying the product, making the product, selling the product, and then seeing how much we made versus how much we spent. And do I anticipate making a whole lot of money? I don't. I don't intentionally don't want to. I just want her to get the experience of seeing how running a business operates at a very small level, obviously, in a lemonade stand example, which is an American classic in terms of the process and what that process looks like.
So what I want to do is just go back before we jump into these solutions, because this is usually the time we jump into solutions. So let's go back a little bit. So let's start at the top. One, as an individual, you must, be honest and transparent about your struggles with money, right? So that's one.
Yep. Rule number one.
Rule number one, when you become a coupleship, you have to be intentional about the money that you're choosing to bring in while also being transparent, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And I want to ask, let's pause there for a second. I think this is an important dimension to that conversation for couples. You should have separate accounts for stuff. Not meaning you got your money, I got my money. Not like that. But it should be a household account where you pay your bills and you all have a certain amount of money going into there, whether, one person's putting all the money or it doesn't matter. But you know how much your bills are. When you do the budget, you'll know how much the mortgage is, how much your utilities typically are, how much, your groceries are, all of that stuff. You put it into like what I call an operating account for the household. So have separate accounts in that way.
Treat it like a business.
And if you got Mr. King and Miss King, Mr. King should have his spending money account where a certain amount goes into that account every pay or every month. Mrs. King should have her spending account. And then more importantly, what I'm learning and maturing to is Mr. King needs his day of the week and Miss King needs her day of the week. And then they need a day together.
Yeah.
Because those relational things help the discourse or helps the chemistry stay fluid and everybody has balance and things like that. So I just want to throw that in there. So separate accounts, operating household account, personal spending account for Mr. King, personal spending account for Ms. King, and then allocated days during the week where I got the kids, you got the kids, you go do your thing, I go do my thing, and then a day where we find a babysitter and we do something together.
So I like that. If you had, a couple sessions ago or episodes, I call them sessions, Joy and I was on, and one of the things that we pointed out that for our house, now what's interesting, all of our money goes into one account, but they go into 3 other accounts. So they automatically go into 3 other accounts. So we could talk about that in another time or when we had dinner.
So you can have all the bread going into the household account and then you just put your cut or whatever the spending money is into the account. And then everybody should have a savings account. I didn't put that in there. So some money should be going into savings for emergencies, future trips, or whatever that you have on the horizon. Again, attaching those things you want to do for your family, you want to do for yourself to the money.
Yeah. So as an individual, right, conquer or, be straight up about and transparent about your struggles with money. So that's one. Secondly, as a couple, understand the concept of money, how we want to use the money and our purpose for money. As you're raising, if you choose to raise kids, integrate the concept of what money is, how it works, and how it can work for you. That way, you're not passing down a generational curse of financial struggle. So it's a family form of financial literacy, because far too often when we think about financial literacy, we think about it in a different level rather than this level here. Because what you're literally doing is building a organization, because each family is a corporation. Let's be real about it.
You just dropped the bar. You said financial literacy, what you're literally doing. You just dropped the bar there, Mr. King. I like you. You're in J mode now. Keep going. Keep going.
So what we go. So let's transition to what some things that can help. So let's get into, because we got about 7 minutes left. Let's get into solutions. All right. So you as an individual, go to therapy and be honest about money. You as a couple, be honest about money. As you work with your kids, teach them about money. Now, what are some things that Huntington or yourself has done in order to help support? So how can individuals get support? And for those that are watching on YouTube, when this is uploaded, this will be a part of the show notes. Go ahead.
Absolutely. So first off, I want to say I'm representing this show as a friend. So I'm just going to share some resources in general, not particular to Huntington.
Got you.
Although here at Huntington, I think every customer needs, as you heard me say, you should have a bank account for different things. So every customer needs a good banker. So we have good bankers at Huntington. So shameless plug for some of my folks out in the city of Cleveland that are bankers at our Huntington branches. Feel free to go see them, set accounts up with them, etc. But yeah, I put a couple of resources in preparation for this conversation because it's something that is really important to me, because my mom had a lot of financial trauma. So this is almost a project, a passion project of sorts to me when I have the opportunity to talk about these things. So the first thing I want to say is that creating that budget like that in black and white, like a physical budget, which I know sounds like a dinosaur. You can do it on the app nowadays. I like to do it on paper and pen because I think it just makes it more real for me. You can go to, there's going to be a link that Eric drops on the show notes and YouTube. There's going to be to Forbes magazine's article about the best budgeting apps that are out there. They list about 10 of them, so he'll drop that. The other website I like to use when it comes to just getting information about money, whether you're contemplating getting a credit card or you're looking to try to find a good budget for you and your family, templates you can use for it is nerdwallet.com. So NerdWallet, NERD wallet.com has a lot of resources around financial tools and things you can use and information you can read on as it relates to creating a budget, evaluating, rewards cards, etc. So that's another good one. So Erica also dropped that in the show notes for you to leverage as a website or web link to go to. And then last but not least, I pulled an article from U.S. News on money. And so it's personal finance, saving and budgeting article, simple and free budgeting tools. And so he'll drop that link as well. But I think that I kind of want to summarize my recommendations for the audience as it relates to overcoming money trauma or getting a better handle on your money. So one, be transparent, like we said, Eric, and vulnerable around your, around your handling of money or your views of money. And that's with either yourself or it could be with somebody else. And if you got strong trauma or you got harsh trauma, like were really oppressed or something, or it was really used to control you at some point, I agree with Eric. Even find a good counselor so you can talk that out and get that out of you so you can overcome it. Two, be intentional about having the interactions, in particular if you're in partnership or you got a spouse or something, and you all are making joint decisions on money. And you should, in my opinion, you should be if you're in the same house. You should be making joint decisions on money because everybody's money affects everybody in the house. And it can have some emotional ramifications if you're not in alignment with that. And unfortunately, one of the leading causes of divorce in the United States is due to money. Yes, so that's a big one on the big list, money stress,
yes,
or money, whatever. But so you want to be in alignment with that. So that's the second thing. Be intentional about having those meetings together. Be intentional and don't make it too formal where it's not like fun. So it could be fun. You could do fun, play Monopoly or something. I don't know. They got all kind of games out there where you can incorporate it.
My daughter cheats. My daughter cheats at Monopoly. But go ahead.
Oh, she cheats at Monopoly. Yeah, my daughter's not big enough for it yet, but she doesn't like to lose, so I can see that happening in my house too. And then third, use an official tool. So use a tool. So be vulnerable, be intentional about having the conversations. That's with the spouses and or kids. And then use tools like budgets where you can like see it in paper and revisit those tools with a frequency. So I would say just getting at this money thing and you build together, meet every 2 weeks and see how it's going. Look at your bank statements and you can see where all your money's going usually because most of us use debit cards and put that on the budget. So those would be my 3 tips.
So that's them your tips, and we got to close out. We got a couple more minutes, man. Hey, Brother Sam, thank you so much for coming onto the show. You have dropped knowledge as usual. I know that you had to move away from me in order to grow and in order to do your thing. So when you when you come back around here, we got to definitely sit down and do our lunch thing. So I appreciate your time, brother. I appreciate everything that you said. And like I said, everything is going to be in the show notes. So that is Brother Sam Wright. You got an Instagram? So hurry up. We got like less than 40 some seconds. Go.
I'm not big on the social media, man. I like to come live and in person like this, but I want to give a shout out to Bert Bellinkar and Eric King and your group for having me here today. I'm so grateful for the opportunity just to share things I've learned. It's always an honor and a privilege, and I'm very, very grateful that you thought of me for this opportunity. So thank you, and thank you to Bert Bellinkar for giving us the space and the studio to use to do it.
All right, man. I appreciate you. I appreciate everybody. So next week we got my brother Brian. Remember B from From CSU, he got we're gonna talk about entrepreneurship and family because he just opened up a new branch.
Yeah.
So we're gonna head out. This is Unapologetically Strong on WOVU. Peace.